Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the True Crime Podcasters Roundtable. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's great to have you here this evening. So my name is Adam, host of the UK True Crime Podcast. Let's introduce my co-host. Firstly, Mike, you've been in the wars this week. What's been going on?
I've been an idiot. I injured my back, so I put a hot water bottle in it because my back was sore. The water bottle split. I didn't realize, and I've got second-degree burns on my back. Ooh, nice. So I went to the hospital, and a very nice nurse burst them. You could feel her doing that. She had to kind of twist them off, and she was having such a lovely time.
Well, for those of you who are eating dinner, I hope you're enjoying your food.
Shall I get them out?
Anyway, let's move on. Paul, how's things in Wrexham?
Things in Wrexham are very wet at the moment. It is just been biblical rain all weekend. So much so I'm expecting to see the Ark floating past later on. It is just crazy. Apart from that, everything is tickety-boo.
Hey, great stuff. And we've got two fantastic guests tonight. Known to all of you here, I'm sure. We've got Bob and Ali, the hosts of Twisted Britain. Hey, guys.
How you doing? You all right?
Hey, both.
Hi, everybody.
We're good. This is the most technical we've ever been at any point in our lives together.
It is. It took me half an hour to log in.
But you've got more of this to come because in the old days, you boys used to go to the boozer in Stirling, have a chat, and that was it, wasn't it? So what's been going on? I've heard you've moved, Ali.
I am now in Bournemouth. I am engaged.
Wow.
Ooh, that's
incredible.
A man engagement ring. I'm just like everybody to take a fucking
yeah.
moment
3
for this.
diamonds, no carrots.
So how's the show going now then? What's happening?
We've
It's going really well. Still, I'm coming up to Scotland as much as possible to record with Bob. We're trying at least once a month and doing 3 or 4 records if possible.
We did a couple of records. What was it now? 2 weeks ago, Ali? You might be coming up in the next week or two. But our issue is, like, we'd love to do all of our recordings live because actually we find it better in person, much prefer the conversational aspect of that. The problem is, by the time Ali and I have spent 2.5 hours in the pub recording a couple of episodes, the third episode is just nonsense.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just hammered by the end of it.
Yeah. But I've also started doing tiny twisteds and putting them out on Facebook as videos.
They've been really good, actually. I've really enjoyed them because I don't have to do any work mainly. They have a bit of the same kind of feel as your videos that you do, Adam, when you're out and about. So, but Ali does them in the pub because it's on brand, isn't it?
And because I love a pint.
Yeah. Stop doing it in spoons, though. I'm sad at you.
Yeah. Start. Get in 1 spoon.
Oh, spoons.
Okay. So let me tell you the format this evening. So Ali's going to talk to us about a subject for 10 minutes or so. Then Bob's going to talk to us about something. Paul, Mike, I'll mention a few things. Then we'll finish by about 50 minutes. So Ali, over to you.
Yeah, why not? I'd like to talk about a couple of things which I think are systemic of the growth in true crime recently. The growth in our industry has been staggering, I think, across the board over the past couple of years. True crime podcasts alone from, I think it was 2020 to 2022, saw like a 66% increase in listeners to over 22 million, I think it is now. And televised documentaries, I think, show very similar growth. So as more and more new podcasts appear, and as TV channels scramble, essentially, to create enough content to keep up with demand, I was interested to know if you guys thought, as I do, that we're seeing a worrying increase in the more sensationalist documentaries and podcast content, and a decrease in the quality and the extent of research in a lot of them.
Fucking hell, Ali. I'll caveat with you because we had a brief chat earlier. Like I say, brief, couple of minutes really on the phone, and I think our takeaways from just our wee chat was like, more content's good if it's done well. Now I know you guys probably think along the same lines that if one fact wrong in a show devalues it entirely. I think it's fair to say. I think my issue with it is when it's presented as like perfection and it's absolute dog shit. I think the trade-off for production value is where I really struggle.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree.
I think with especially with podcasts as well, I think this is something that we've all noticed, especially during lockdown, that a lot of people jumped on the true crime bandwagon because they wanted to be famous, and that was their focus. They wanted to make money, and a lot weren't really into true crime. So you're right. There's been a real dearth of kind of quality research. A lot of people just want to use Wikipedia, and unfortunately, you can see that with TV shows where they make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a producer recently about TV shows, true crime TV shows, and they tend not to be written by. Do you know, like if you get a history show, it'll be written by Professor such and such, who's an expert on royalty or stuff like that. True crime doesn't have that. It tends to be written by the company who makes it, who go, oh, well, that's popular. Oh, great, we've got a commission. Well, we'll write it, which is why they make mistakes. So there's a lot.
There's no regulation.
No, and I think people seem to think that if you put it out on telly, that a team of people sit down and they go, right, okay, let's go through all your research and double check that it's right. But it's not, because they've got a schedule to reach to. They've just got to get it out. They've got to get it done. They want to make the money and they want to fuck off.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned briefly there the fame game as well, and I think that's even worse in a lot of ways. I remember the start of last year, the Nicola Bewley case, where she fell in the river, and her family were inundated with people bothering them, and they weren't true crime podcasters. They were TikTokers and conspiracy theorists, and properties in the town were broken into by people who were pertaining to be investigative journalists, but they were just social media influencers looking for clicks.
I wonder if we're going to get to the point where the police will turn up at a scene and the scene will be ruined by podcasters, TikTokers trying to get their footage. I think we're not too far away from that. That must be a nightmare for you, like you, Bob, being like, given that you're a proper journalist, there must be a real kind of counterbalance of you and your ethics and what you're trained to do, and that people who will just bulldoze into an area to film something because they want to get famous.
Absolutely. I mean, journalism, and no matter what you think about mainstream media and journalism in the UK, we're very lucky to have a very well-regulated, decent press. You can disagree with me as much as you want, but I genuinely believe that. And there isn't a journalistic ethic that goes with that, as you say. So we would never immediately respond to something, because you have to have that facts right, because once it's out there, as we all know, once it's out there, it's out there. The podcasting element of that, and I'll use podcasting because, to be honest, I'm just going to lump kind of YouTube podcasting, all that kind of content creation into one umbrella term. As you say, because there's no regulation, there's no knockback, and those that will remain unnamed. I've done it before, but I'll not do it again on your show. That either take other people's research or verbatim, whether it's right or wrong, and just spew it out there, is another entity to this as well. The problem being, I think, is that there are people out there who do a very, very good job who aren't trained journalists, who aren't ex-police force. So the problem there is that if you regulate it too much, you make it difficult for people who are good at what they do, but not experts at what they do, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does. Paul, what do you think about this?
Well, I pretty much agree with all of the points that have been raised so far. I'll go back to what Mike said about I think really that broadcasting, say I can think of a certain particular channel, I won't name it, but most of the content is featured on true crime, and it's a lot of it is absolute dog shit, to quote Rob as well. I think quite bizarrely and sadly, as technology and time and the availability of things like drones and everything has gone on, and something could be wonderful, it's gone too much repetitive and vague. Compare and contrast, say, a documentary that comes on a certain channel now and Crime Watch UK that's available on YouTube, and you think, remember Crime Watch, it's concise, it's to the point, memorable, because it's all factually correct, nothing's repeated in it. We should get the same drone shot after every advert break. You'll get the same recap of what's happened. You know, they make an hour program into something about 15 minutes worth of content, really, and I find that quite bizarre. I think makers get lazy because they jump on this true crime bandwagon and want to get something out there. Think, oh my God, everybody's going to watch it because they'll be talking about it and TikToking about it and all this bollocks. And no, it's not. It's sensationalism. A lot of it is, yes.
We used to see a lot of that on Adam's forum, where every so often you'd get someone jump in and they'd go, "Hi, I'm from a production company. We're doing a documentary about Dennis Nilsson. Does anyone know anything about Dennis?" And you go, "Hang on, you're the researcher. You should be way ahead of this instead of going to a forum and asking random people for their thoughts." It's just, but as we know, with a lot of these true crime shows, the researchers you don't have true crime researchers. What you have is researchers. So they might work on a history show, they might work on a sports show, they might work on a cooking show, and they'll jump between them. So there's no experts out there, except very occasionally when you get a curated true crime series.
I was just about to say that there are exceptions to this massively. There is stuff that is incredibly well made and well documented. You take the Emma Caldwell case that's just closed in Scotland. 19 years without somebody being found guilty for it. The documentary kind of interview Sam Poling, who's a BBC investigative journalist, did actually interviewing Ian Packer, is incredible. Like, it's one of the best pieces of true crime journalism that's happened in the last wee while. In my opinion, I'm very lucky to know Sam, but at the same time, I think what she did was incredible. And you tie that in then again with the I'm Not Nicholas, the Nicholas Rossi podcast that came out last year.
Yeah.
It just so well done. It actually puts... They will get the numbers, obviously, because they're on big platforms and they're made by big production houses and stuff like that. But actually, the effort that's gone into making these either TV series or podcasts puts even those of us around this round table to shame, because it's an insane amount of work to create 8 episodes on one case, for instance. And when done well, it's beautiful. It really is. But when it's done badly, it's absolute nonsense. And as somebody should have just said in the chat, how do you regulate that? You can't. It literally costs nothing to start a podcast. We've all got this. We've all got one of these and a set of headphones. I convinced Mike to buy some AirPods recently. Changed his life, apparently.
Oh my God, they're amazing.
But that's literally all you need to create a podcast. Then you go on somewhere like Spreaker or Acast or whoever it happens to be. I won't, not siding with anyone, but do download the Spreaker app if you're going to use Twisted Britain. It's much better.
I also think the quality is going to go down now as well, now that people are starting to use AI to do their research.
I'm not sure. Yeah, so content quality, I would agree with. Sound production quality can only go up. And that's massively. And I'm sure Bethan from Seeing Red will not mind me quoting her, saying that she feels like they recorded their first episodes on a potato. It's one of my favourite things she's ever said.
But research.
The research, yeah. I think Mike and I and Ali had the pleasure of meeting up in London for a couple of pints this week. And I'm sure I was telling
couple.
and then a couple more. I wrote an episode of Twisted Britain using ChatGPT. And I say I wrote it. I didn't tell Ali I was doing this. So I just basically I asked it the question, can you write an episode of Twisted Britain? And other than the fact that it wrote the intro correctly, got our Facebook and everything correct in the intro, called us Mary and Sally or something like that. So, you know, just got our weekend names.
It's
instead of our
Saturday.
week
Yeah, sure.
one. Got there before you. And he gave me the case of the disappearance of Agatha Christie, which actually is very Twisted Britain. Like it's right on brand for what we talk about.
Yeah, that's up there
But
for you guys, isn't it?
it was like 1,200 words, and it's actually, you know what it was? It was a synopsis of the case, giving a couple of facts in amongst the way. So what I did was I took that and I read that verbatim, but I also did my own research and wrote my normal notes that I did and did the episode. But actually, that was, when was that, Ali? Was that the beginning of last year?
Yeah,
Must have been about that. But it was so close to being good. It wasn't good, but it was close to being good that it's not going to take much time. I mean, me just asking it that question has made AI better. You know, that's the ridiculous fact of it. But people, you know, it would be so easy to do a, you know, $9.99 a month better platform than GDP or whatever, and get a script every week and just sit here and read it.
Well,
that is probably the future.
Well, Bob, let's name names. I'm quite happy to name names. So the plagiarism one's a Crime Junkie. So number one in the US, all the rest of it. And if you do a search on Crime Junkie plagiarism, you'll see the scandal. And they refuse to take it all down. So AI might be a step forward for them. But hey, they're making £1 million. But look, let's not go there. Should we move on, Bob? Let's move on to what were you going to bring to the table today?
Just a beer usually, but no, I actually wanted to talk a bit about the Emma Caldwell murder case that's just been happening in the UK. It was 19 years to bring Ian Packer to justice. I don't want to talk about him because why should anybody ever fucking talk about him anyway? There will obviously be a podcast about it somewhere down the line, but it's not for us to do. He was handed the second longest sentence in Scottish courts. I think Adam could probably name the longest sentence. He's written a book about the man. So Packer got 36 years, which is because there's no whole life term in Scotland. So when we're doing our research for cases, we always have to be very... we have to remember whether we're talking about Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, because obviously there's different justice systems, and the Scottish justice system is inherently more different, I would say, than the other ones. So I think probably what I'm asking is, at what point do we think the prison system should be dealt with, and should we have a whole life term? None of us around here believe that capital punishment should be a thing, but. And then there's the third verdict in Scotland, that's the not proven thing, which they're in the theory of talking about removing. But to be fair, they've been talking about that for years and years and years. I just kind of wanted to talk a bit about, because that's always the end of our podcasts, isn't it? The end of the podcast is they go to jail and something happens, or we don't know who did it. You know, that the culmination of pretty much everybody around this table's cases are, and then the court hands out whatever sentence. And it just... Do you feel like when you get to the end of the research for the cases, you're kind of doing it, you tend to feel more pissed off at what's handed out more often than not? It's probably the easiest way of putting that.
That's an interesting question. Mike, what do you think?
Sorry, I was.
Sorry, I waffled a lot there as well.
Sorry,
apologies.
No,
I'm boring you.
I was halfway through reading a text at the same time from a family member. So someone else talk, and then I'll catch up.
Professional podcaster.
Professional, right to the heart. Right. Also, it's quite warm in here. I've got the fire on.
Well, Ali, what do you think?
I would agree with Bob. And I'll also point out though that although Scotland don't have a statutory life sentence, an entire life sentence, when someone's sentenced to life with 37 years, they will serve a minimum of 37 years. That was the 36-year sentence Bob's talking about. That is 36 years before he'll even be considered for parole. So it is a very severe sentence. But I always come at it from a historian's point of view. I tell the story, and I accept the judgment of the justice system at the time. I never agree with capital punishment, for example, But unless it's a miscarriage of justice, that person got the sentence appropriate to the time period.
We've talked about this on an episode recently. I can't remember if that episode's actually gone out, but that was literally your words were, I don't, and I'm pretty sure, in fact, no, I think it's the episode that just went out, the Junan Davani case that I covered recently. It's one of the only times I've ever said, if you want to skip forward a bit to not hear what happened to June, skip forward a minute and a half now. A 4-year-old girl who was taken from a hospital and horrible things happened to her. And it was a man just who fuck knows why he did it. I still don't know why he did it, but he was sentenced to execution. And it was, your words were literally like, this is the only time I've gone, yeah, fine, that's all right. And it was the most he could have been given in the time period, so it was the right. Yeah. But now, obviously you move on.
Exactly, but there are exceptions to that as well. I was at a fascinating talk very recently by Professor Rose Wallace, a historian in Dorchester, on the Elizabeth Martha Brown case. She murdered her husband in 1850 something. I can't remember the specific date. But she was a serial domestic abuse victim. And he was an adulterous domestic abuser. But her case was handled very poorly, and very poorly for very political reasons. She was given the death sentence. It was carried out. But it is considered one of the biggest miscarriages of justice, and it was actually one of the cases that led to the abolishment of capital punishment.
All right. Oh, super interesting. Paul, have you got a view on this, Paul?
I have, yeah. So I could be here all night talking about life sentences and everything like that. Does what they get justify the crime that they've done? And I'm not an advocate for capital punishment whatsoever. One mistake is too many, and we all know the examples in history of this. Now, for people like, say, the Moors murderers or Sutcliffe when he was alive, that monster, I can't remember his name now, who murdered that family of 3 last year, who's just been given a whole lifetime, Damien something his name is right now. Now, that's the maximum sentence you can get, whole life, right? But is it in prison, say, so he'll be segregated from the rest of the prisoners, right? He just has kind of the time of his life, really. He'll get more than like someone here on the streets and everything like that. And I firmly believe myself, if they're doing life for something like that, they should be told after they've been sentenced, at one point during your sentence, it might be tomorrow, it might be 6 or 7 years down the line, but one day that gate separating you from the other prisoners will be left open, and you will be beaten to within an inch of your life. We will save your life, we will heal you back, and then that will start again. And they should always have that morbid fear. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Is it going to happen in the next half an hour? You should live with that every waking moment of the day. That's punishment, I believe.
Interesting. Mike, are you back with us? As the family, is everything okay in the family? Just checking.
They've just been sentenced to 38 years, yeah.
It's really weird because I've been watching a lot of court TV where they're sentencing people on via their webcams, and this is exactly like that. I kind of feel like Adam is the judge, and he's going to go, for urinating in the street and having sex with a sheep, I charge you to £20. Hopefully, just £20, not a month in prison. £20 would be fine. Thank you. I've got that somewhere. I'm doing all right.
It's interesting you bring that up, actually, because when Ali and I spoke earlier, that Ali had a couple of things that he was possibly going to talk about. The other one was based off the kind of question that Ali asked about impartiality within and clean scenes and too much information of crime scenes and things like that. Can you get such a thing as an impartial juror now? Because it's literally because of a 24-hour rolling news cycle and Twitter X is going to give it to you. Facebook, everything's there instantly. So where we talk about, the 1870s and they moved the case from London to High Wycombe or whatever it happens to be, so that they can move it out of the town where the perpetrator committed their crimes. And that was enough to remove create impartiality. Sorry.
Yeah.
You just don't have that anymore.
No, you don't. I think it's ridiculous nowadays. If I was on the jury, I promise you, every night I'll be home. I'll be on social media. I'll be looking at the person responsible or accused, rather, and everyone else. I'll be looking at the other jury members, and I'll be trying to assess who might find guilty. Wouldn't you? In reality,
Yeah, of course.
100%, I would.
When I was foreman of the jury, I had to bring it up to one of the jurors because even though it had been mentioned to her, she was actually in the jury room on her phone. I was like, I hate to be a bit of a bellend, but you're not really allowed to have your phone here. And she was because it was an assault charge, and the other guy had already been tried, but we weren't allowed to know the outcome, and he was actually found guilty. She was like, I just want to know what happened to him, and it's like, you're not allowed to do that. She was like, I need to know, and I was like, no, you need to base the case on the evidence we've been given right here. But it's weird, isn't it? I think it's only going to get worse. They're going to have to they're going to have to put people into secure isolation for the duration that they're in the jury room.
So
give them some form of training in making impartial decisions. Because these people, our jurors, literally come off the streets. It's literally members of the public.
Yeah.
Well, there's an argument at the moment going on in the Scottish court systems about judge-led trials, completely judge-led trials, removing juries from sex crimes and a certain category of crimes. I'm sure it is just sexual violence and sexual crimes. I don't know enough about it to go into the details, but it's to be tried as if tried, so that you remove that inherent "I hate you because it's a sex crime" and leave a professional to make that judgment.
Well, you say that, Bob, but are they professional? So I've known about 3 judges in my life, and I wish I hadn't. Okay, and they're so far removed from my life, they haven't got a clue what's going on. Yeah. If I asked them what pegging was, they wouldn't know what it was. They couldn't even ask Prince William.
That?
They got no idea what pegging is. they're not living on the same planet as us. That's my concern.
What is pegging, Adam?
This is like the wrong time to. Poppy has just invaded, and this is what we're talking about.
Hello, Poppy.
Hi, Poppy.
So, Poppy, what's your opinion on the death penalty? Is it good or bad? I wanted to know what she thinks about the death penalty.
Oh, no, you don't. She's an absolute terrorist. You don't want to know.
She's an advocate.
I bet she's like off with her head straight away.
Bring back capital punishment like that.
Yeah, she's probably got like a noose outside ready to string people up.
Jumping on the comments that I can see here, 2 good points I've just seen. That it's one from Catherine who says there's a good argument for professional juries, and underneath Sarah asks, should jurors have training?
Actually. Yeah, it's done in different countries.
Good
I think Scandinavia employ jurors for a full year, and they'll give them 2 months training before they'll see a trial, and they will pay them for that full year.
I'd do it. I'd love it, wouldn't you? I'd be there. Would you?
I've never been called as a juror, and I'd love to, but my issue is I'm a podcast researcher, so like I'm instantly starting taking notes.
Yeah, but Bob, ask yourself why that is. You haven't been called. There is a reason, obviously, isn't there?
Here's another way, bouncing off that idea as well. Given the fact that one of the most popular university degrees is law, and we have more lawyers in the world than we actually need. When all these people are going to university and learning to do law, why don't we make them jurors? Why isn't that part of their 3-year university course in that every couple of weeks they just do jury service? They learn and they're professionals, and you don't have to train them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It was such a good point that Ali fucked off.
I know. I didn't know we were going to come on here and change the world, and Ali just blacked out and died. Yeah.
Ali just exploded.
And Mike, on a similar point, if all the law students become jurors, what do all the criminology students do?
Well, they go back to being unemployed. Or fat ex-detectives with a book to sell.
And a TV show.
A shit TV show.
Well, I've still got one more crime con to do. Give us a break. Come on.
Enjoy it.
Bob, when's Crime Con Scotland? In April, is it?
April. Yeah.
Don't advertise it.
I'm not going to. No, we'll be there though. I'll advertise us. But no, Ali and I will be there in Glasgow, and we look forward to seeing anybody who's coming along.
Ali's already on his way there. That's why he's fucked off
He started walking.
to go to the
Trying to
bar.
write to pay for it, isn't he? That's what he's trying to do. Goodness gracious.
He started a crowdfunder.
So let's move on, shall we? Paul, you were going to bring something to the table.
Yeah, so recently, topically in the news, I happened to catch an account the other day that referenced the infamous Mackay kidnapping. I'm sure you all know the story that I'm going on about, when the two brothers tried to kidnap the then wife of Rupert Murdoch, who's just got engaged again, apparently, at the age of 600 or whatever he is.
I think we know someone else who's that age as well.
I think we do, yeah, a walnut head. Yes, we do that. But, so the Mackay,
He's got more engagements than your average serial killer in prison, hasn't he?
he's got rings through him. He's that old. Right? And so the Mackay case pops up on the news the other day. It's an infamous case. I'm sure you all know the case that I'm going on about, don't you? Two brothers kidnapped who they thought was the then wife of Rupert Murdoch, grabbed the deputy chairman's wife, Muriel Mackay. Her body was never found. They were captured soon after, and it's an infamous case. Now, one of the brothers is dead. The other one was released long ago and deported back to Trinidad. And he is now working with the Mackay family to try and find her body. And I was on the kind of belief that she was fed to pigs. And if that was the case, do you think there is any chance of them actually finding anything? Or is it mentioned on the news because of its infamy? And it's a pointless exercise. What do you think?
What do you think?
I think myself, personally, after 55 years, I don't think they'll find anything. And it's not it's around a farm. It's not a massive site in the scale of, say, Saddleworth Moor, where Keith Bennett is buried. It's not a massive scale to look. I do not think they will find anything. I wondered what your thoughts were.
Especially if it's like a moor, like as I said with the Moors murderers, when you put a body in kind of like peat and things like that, it degrades really fast. So the likelihood of finding anything or anything that's serviceable as a piece of evidence after this amount of time, it's just not going to be credible, is it?
And it's interesting. We spoke recently, Ali and I, about a case that I can't remember which one it was, but basically it was a cold case from the 1920s, and basically we came to the conclusion that at some point, barring a massive change in technology, a cold case has to become a frozen case, for lack of a better word. At some point, they become unsolvable. And each case will have a different tipping point. So yeah, 55 years you're talking about, Paul. That might be enough for it to be, well, we'll never get anything. But there are other cases that it could be, it's only going to take 5 or 6 years. A body at sea or something like that. I don't know. I'm just picking things out of the air now. But that difference between cold case and revisiting and giving it due diligence and due purpose, like them going back to look at the farm, is the right thing to do. In the back of their heads, there's no way they think they're going to find anything. But the interest to me is, at what point do you go, a cold case is now unsolvable? Like, this is the point where we go, we can't do it anymore.
Well, it brings me on something else. Sorry to interrupt you, mate. It brings me on something else that I wanted to raise as well, which is the fact that I believe the team looking for Madeleine McCann have just been awarded another £100,000 to continue their investigation.
Thank God for that.
Because as we all know, that only one child has ever gone missing ever.
My point exactly, Mike. My point exactly. When are the other countless missing people you don't know getting the same amount of money spent on a search for them?
Yeah.
But think of all the well-researched podcasts we've had out of it.
Yeah, true. Actually, that good point down there. Ben Needham. God, I remember that name from when I was at college. What's that? Ben Needham was 1990. Still missing today. So that's 30 odd years ago.
Yeah, but Mike, there's all these great ex-detectives who've had these great track records of
really having a go of the night, aren't you, Adam? Bloody hell.
Yeah, I mean, can't we draft them into some of it? They could do well, and they could even have a sketch show about it.
Because don't forget, they're made of magic because they solved all these serial killer cases by themselves. There wasn't a single police officer who actually did any work. They did it themselves. So there we go.
100%
I agree.
out. I'm out.
They brought some of the biggest monsters in Britain to justice, haven't they? Or
Well,
not.
exactly.
Enjoy crime,
The deaths.
Ali. It's gonna be a great show.
Fuck Ali, we're not going to Glasgow anymore, by the way. But you know, you take that Ben Needham case. That's the perfect example of like 33 years ago. Is it now unsolvable? In fact, Madeleine McCann is essentially unsolvable as well. We all, I think, we would probably agree without the you know I can't remember what's his name, Christian, the German suspect.
Yeah.
Unless he turns around and goes, yeah, okay, I did it. That's the only way this is going to get solved because nobody else is ever going to come forward, is it? Are they?
Yeah.
So the digging of the reservoirs and the popping the holes in the ground here and there. Do you know what? Yes, it should be done. And I was joking when I was, obviously, thank God they've got that money. But actually, yes, these things should be done because it shouldn't be closed until they go, actually, it's closed. And every snowstone should be left unturned, whatever you want to say about it. But there has to be that point where you go, sorry, like, there are other, we are more likely to solve knife crime in Wrexham. That money's spent better there.
I hear it's a shithole.
It's all those folk wearing Wu-Tang t-shirts.
Doing other things.
So happens daily. By the time you pull up in traffic lights in Wrexham and they're on red, by the time they've gone green, you've been asked to join 2 gangs.
Says the man in a Wu-Tang shirt. Like, I mean, come on.
Video, don't you?
It's all about
Reality
Thug Life.
TV.
It's all about Thug Life.
No, it's a really interesting one, but yeah, I think you always keep looking until the point where you can't look, but then that's a very floaty answer.
Okay, so Bob, let me ask you this. So should the police open their files to the amateur sleuths? There's some dreadful ones with double-barreled surnames, for example, but there's some really good amateur sleuths out there as well. Why not? You haven't managed to solve a crime for 30 years. Open your files. Let people do it.
I suppose the don't fuck with cats is like the perfect example of that, isn't it? That's the internet solved that. One of my favorite ever stories was Ali going, I've just had a lovely chat with this woman. Apparently she's quite famous. It was the woman from Don't Fuck With Cats that he was talking to. But that's lovely. The perfect... Yeah, she was lovely, actually. Yeah. Great trousers. But that's that perfect example of amateur sleuths solving. And that's the sensational one. It's the one we all know about because of Netflix. Yeah. But I suppose the danger with that is there is no training. We go back to you talking about the jurors and things like that. There's none of those people have training. We're the training that we all have for podcasting is by doing it. With exception of maybe having watched a couple of YouTube videos about how to press record on a laptop or whatever it happens to be. Having recorded in person with Adam, I know that's anyway. It's I don't know. It's a really dangerous one. To give it up to an amateur is really, it could go so wrong. Yeah, but then again, it could go right.
You don't want to open up completely to every TikToker and every social media influencer out there.
No, fuck no. I've been on TikTok. It's weird, man.
I've thought for ages that it should do it, but it has to be regulated. Of course, you can't give it to fucking True Crime Potting Shed or anything to
great show.
Yeah, great show. It's up there, my favourites. But you can't give it to something like that. What you need to do is look at a show. Take, for example, Plucking Out of the Air, They Walk Among Us. Right, it's a standard show, isn't it? It's up there with your true crime here. If Ben and Rosie decided that they wanted to look into cold cases like that, I believe that like a vetting agency should look at them and say, right, okay, they've been doing this for X amount of years. They've got that amount of episodes. The quality is fantastic due to the reviews. Yeah, let's talk to them, give them a try, ease evidence to them, knowing that they won't abuse it. You should do something like that. Just what I think.
It's an interesting thing when you do get access to like court records and police files and stuff like that. When you open it up, it's kind of there's a lot of information in there because it's never been planned that someone who's a podcaster or a YouTuber or a TV series is going to open up these files, and suddenly the amount of information that's in there, you can understand why a lot of these files or a lot of this information is held for 3 generations sometimes, because not only do you have the immediate families of the victims and the perpetrators, but you've got the next of kin, then you've got the next of kin after that. So there's definitely a kind of a layer of which, if people are going to go that far, they do need to be trained. And you're absolutely right. It shouldn't just be open to anyone because you know, we're good and decent people. I mean, some of us are, not all of us. But and you know, we like to approach things in a very sensitive way. But there's a lot of people who just won't give a shit, and they will just go for the sensational, and they'll just be like, "Oh, that's the house where the killer lived. I have to let everyone know where he lived, what his home number was, what his trouser size was, what disabilities he had."
It should be tied up with some sort of disclaimer that you thoroughly have to sign, saying, right, you cannot air this, that, and the other. Even like watermark crime scene pictures or something, so you can't repost them on Instagram or something like that. They would soon know who was serious about wanting to help.
Yeah, they would.
I mean, you come back to what you said earlier, Mike, about my day job outside of podcasting. You know, I've set up my camera. For those that don't know, I work as a cameraman for a rather large media organization, and we've had to move wheelie bins out of the background of shot because it's had painted house numbers on it. You know, identifiable things, and those sort of processes go on in my mind all the time because I'm like, well, I can't. That's the best shot I have, but the house number's on that, so you can't. Even though you're talking about people who probably know, well, you can find it on fucking Google Maps or whatever you want anyway. But there has to be that level of integrity that goes with it. And actually, integrity and impartiality are the 2 words that I always think have to intertwine when you're talking about. Because what we do as podcasters is journalism, whether we like it or not. You know, to me, it falls under that category. We're researching and telling a story and revisiting. It's pretty essentially journalism, really, isn't it? If you can't do integrity and impartiality alongside that, yeah, you don't make the new course to be a amateur sleuth with a vet or whatever it happens to be, you know.
Does that take us back to where we were last week in the conversation, where we were talking about true crime and the difference between, as you say, journalism and entertainment? Where's the border? Where's the boundary? Where do we sit?
Sadly, it's very blurred.
It is. I agree with you entirely, Bob. I consume true crime for entertainment, and I'm very aware when I'm consuming it, it's the worst day of someone's life. What do you think, Ali?
I agree. I'm very aware of the historic tales that Bob and I tell. One of the reasons we don't cover, we say, crimes within living memory, is that we don't want to upset anybody ever. And
litigation.
And litigation is true. But even in some of the stories that we tell from history, and I think we've become more and more, as we've progressed as podcasters, and we've become more and more victim aware. Even in the way we tell our stories, we'll try wherever we can use the surnames of perpetrators and the first names of victims because it humanizes the victim. And
quite often I just use an adjective.
Very recently, we haven't released it yet, but I covered the teacup poisoner and I wrote 3 episodes on it without mentioning his name, apart from once at the very, very, very end.
He's got a lot of time in his hands these days.
I do.
But it's really interesting because, Paul, you mentioned this last time. We were talking about people using the word ripper, weren't we? That we just don't like at all.
No, not at all. It's any kind of sensational word. Ripper.
It's a sensationalist word.
Something like that, you know, it's... Yeah, you don't need to... I understand it sells papers, and it does draw people's attention. How many... and actually, going back to what you said about entertainment and journalism, how often do you see memes that have pictures of someone lying awake and it says, me trying to sleep, listening to a sleep podcast, and underneath, sleeping peacefully, me listening to true crime.
Yeah.
They're common, aren't they? You know, it's what people do. I'm sure we've all been told that people go to sleep listening to us. It's because that's when people have got time on their hands, isn't it? To sit down sometimes and listen to something like that. And yeah.
And actually, I think you touched on it slightly there, Paul, but like, if you want to talk about journalism and entertainment, it didn't start with podcasting. There are newspapers out there that rhyme with the bun, or similar red headlines, shall we say, red fronted newspapers. That is journalistic entertainment. That's not journalism.
Well, I think, Bob, to say The Sun isn't journalism is absolutely right. So I think we should maybe draw a line under it. Right,
I've told you, litigation's not for us, Adam. You crack on, mate.
we got 15 minutes left, okay, guys. So a few questions. Is Adam's hair real? Yeah, I've got a number of spare scalps that I can wear. It's good for the life.
He's moving to Turkey next. That's it.
Yeah, how much plus VAT is a Pooh Crime Award? I don't know what this person's talking about. Who would pay hundreds of pounds just to be nominated for an award? That can't exist, right? It must be somebody taking the mickey, right?
That's bonkers.
If you could offer us a Golden Jobby Award, I'm paying for it.
And the third question we got here: what podcasts are you listening to? Bob, what do you listen to?
So I actually don't listen to a lot of true crime. The one that I would say the most I listen to true crime wise is I love Last Podcast on the Left, and I always have done. I think they are excellent. I think Marcus Parks is a wonderful, wonderful podcaster. No matter what you think about what's happened with Ben recently is beside the point. But it's my go-to for true crime, actually. Used to listen to a lot of True Crime Garage and things like that. But currently, I've said this, Ali and I have talked about this a few times, I actually just like the sound of a human voice telling a story. I don't listen to much music. So I listen to things like, just binged the entire Young Again series by Kirsty Young, where she's interviewing people, because I think she's just an incredible podcaster. I listen to This Is Love with the Phoebe Judge that does This Is Criminal. Her This Is Love series is one, and it's weird when you're just, I'm walking up to the pub or something and I suddenly realize I'm crying about somebody else's life that I've never fucking met before. It's I'm going through the menopause or something. I don't know. I tend to listen to like people's lives, people's stories, rather than I get enough of true crime bloody researching it for the podcast. So I'm always the worst person when somebody says, "Oh, what true crime should I listen to?" I'm like, the True Crime Enthusiast, Murder Mile, and UK True Crime. They're all great.
What about the rest of us? Any recommendations to our audience that they should be listening to, except for ours?
Like Bob, I listen to very few, but Mens Rea is...
Sinead's wonderful.
Sinead's fabulous.
She would make my amateur sleuths list, by the way. She would definitely make my list alongside Ben and Rosie.
Yeah.
What about you, Mike? Do you listen to much?
He's gone.
Mike's frozen. Oh, how about you?
Thinking about it. Well, no, sort of jumping on the bandwagon there. It sounds like, but it's not. I listen to very little true crime myself, as Bob rightly said before. I get enough of it through researching, writing, producing my own show. So sometimes I like to switch off and embracing the massive nerd in me, which I found absolutely fantastic. I listen to that's when I go to sleep. I listen to an internet radio site that plays 24/7 old 1940s Sherlock Holmes episodes.
Sick.
With Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, and absolutely out of this world.
Send me a link, Paul.
Will do, mate. Will do. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Really.
Oh,
that does it for me.
Do you know what I do listen to true crime? I mean, we were all at CrimeCon when Nicola Tallant was there for Crime World, and I knew nothing about Dublin gangsters and drug pushers and all the rest of it, but I listened to her relentlessly. She was great, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And her podcast, I think, is amazing.
The other one I listened to is that I listened to because of somebody I met at CrimeCon was the Troubles.
Ocean.
Ocean. That's what a voice that man has. My goodness. But just wonderfully told. But I only deliberately listen to that because it's not something I knew a huge amount about. and would happily point somebody in his direction if they were looking for something on Irish history. It's just
he has a niche there, doesn't he? He really does.
Absolutely, and it's something that we certainly wouldn't touch.
No,
as a topic, that we have a very unwritten list of topics we'll never touch because we either can't or shouldn't, depending on how you look at it. And that's definitely on there, but he's done it justice and has the ability to do so because he is Irish and he lived there, and that's fine.
Yeah,
I think that is something you can't really cover unless you have a direct connection to it.
Agreed.
No, I agree with you.
There's a few of them actually. You name the big. We could probably all quite happily name massive events that have happened in British history, never mind in the last 20 years or whatever, that we would all go, not for us, thank you very much, nothing to offer, nothing to add. It's a really brave. I think him doing the Troubles is a really brave decision, and I doff my cap to him for doing it, but he's done it very well.
No, I 100% agree. I mean, I've covered a few and I just get so much abuse. So I've not done it for a long time. Look, we've got 10 minutes to go. There's one thing I would like to ask your opinions on. So Chris Cabba, the Met Police guy who's been named, the person who murdered, the Met Police officer accused of murder over a fatal shooting of Chris Cabba has been named. What do you think about this? Should he be named? Ali, what do you think?
I think he probably should have been named. Yeah. I think we need more transparency now more than ever in what the police do and in how they conduct themselves. And I think if they're going to gain back a lot of the trust that they've lost over the past decade because of a variety of incidents, that they need to be more transparent than the general public. And if it was a member of the public, they would have been named.
He's a murderer.
Yeah.
And that boils down to it. And exactly what Ali says. The trust in the British policing and the Met right through to Police Scotland is in the gutters. It really is, because of horrible things that have been incredibly well covered and outed in the press. The police know this. Like, the police themselves know this. I was on a course at the Metropolitan Police College this week about public order. They know that as frontline facing officers, they're in the shit at the moment. But the only way to get out of that is by doing things like, here's the badging, by the way. Here he is. Like, this is not all of us. I remember conducting an interview with Sir Ian Stirling, that used to be the head of Police Scotland, at Tullyallen, which is the police college here in Scotland. And he was making a ridiculous statement that said, Police Scotland is institutionally racist, but my officers aren't. And I went, fuck off, mate. Institutional racism has to come from somewhere. You can't just say the bricks and mortar around me is racist. It is your officers that are creating that issue. Now, the problem with that is if they don't out them, like they have done with them, was it Martin something, wasn't it? I can't remember the guy's name. If they don't out them and distance themselves from that, it will never change. Even though it's changing internally, it needs to change in human perception, because if we're being policed by consent, which is the way policing happens in this country and always has done, you have to have trust and I don't know the words I'm looking for. You have to really believe in what they're doing to have policing by consent as a general rule.
I agree. Paul, what do you think?
So I wonder, do you think this decision to name this officer comes because, like Ali said, they need to be more transparent than ever right now, and it so happens to have come the same week that this inquiry about Wayne Couzens and why he was a serving police officer when he was accused of rape before he even applied to be an officer many years ago? Do you think that's the Met trying to say, look, okay, yeah, we can't afford to cover anything like this up again. We are in the shit. This is the start of them coming back and being honest and making the changes that need to be? Or is it just to kind of deflect more flack off them? I wonder if it really is the start of something better. I don't know. Not convinced.
I hope so.
Me too.
I hope so, but I'm not convinced.
It's that tricky moment, though, isn't it? Is whether we agree with them doing it or not is beside the point. The purpose of doing it, I would presume, is to do exactly what you say, is to distance themselves from these individuals, rather than saying the police force. And it's not the police force, it's him specifically. And that makes a massive difference. If they can individually weed them out, then that makes the institution itself much cleaner and better. But by going, it's not out, 99.9999% of the people who become police officers do it for the right reason.
Mhm.
And that goes without saying, and we all believe that. But it takes one to fuck it all up, doesn't it? And by them going, here's the one that's trying to fuck it all up in our news reports and on our statements. Please don't judge the rest of my officers, depending on who it is, whatever force. Please don't judge everybody here. They are trying to do and make this country. I mean, we're bloody lucky to live in this country and have a very good police force that means we don't have to worry about going outside, other than the red lights in Wrexham, obviously.
Obviously.
But that has to come alongside them being transparent. Transparency, I think, is where it boils down to, isn't it?
Yeah. As Ali said before, if anyone else apart from a police officer would be named, and he's still a human being at the end of the day, more so he should be named. Yeah, I completely agree.
Mike, welcome back, by the way. It's nice to have you back again.
You've had a fucking nightmare tonight.
I can almost hear you. I get this is. I know this is going to be an old reference, but this is like having a conversation with Norman Collier.
Back in the 70s, as per usual. Hey.
Yeah, he did that routine for how many bloody years?
What's your view on this then? What's your view on the Met Officer?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? There's always going to be. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's always going to be rotten apples in the barrel. They're always going to be there. Is it worth naming him? I don't know. That's kind of a tough one, isn't it? I don't know. I'm still unsure, but to kind of penalize, as Bob says, to kind of penalize the whole force based on a few bad people, I think is kind of wrong, especially if you look at every other industry. There's going to be arseholes everywhere. There's going to be people who take the piss. If you look at like CEOs of major companies, how many of them are absolute shitbags who are getting away with stuff every single day? And the reason we don't know about that is because they've got the money to protect themselves. Whereas a bog standard copper, they're just going to be thrown under the bus, which is not to say they don't deserve to be thrown under the bus, but is to say the reason that we're getting angry and upset, and rightfully upset about it, is because we know they're going to be protected.
Should they not be held in higher regard, though? Should they not be held in higher regard because of what they do?
As a public servant, yeah, absolutely. Especially as as a taxpayer, we are funding them. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think people generally do accept that 99% of the police are good people doing it for the right reasons, and it is a couple of bad apples spoiling it for everyone. But I think a lot of the public have lost confidence in the police prosecute within their own industry, and I think because of that, they have to step up their game and almost be more zealous and more transparent and more open with their internal affairs.
I mean, I think it's an impossible job. If I was advising any of my children, I'd be saying, do not join the police. You can't win.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame, isn't it? Because as we know from CrimeCon, there are some great ex-police people about who did amazing jobs.
You're doing wonderful this evening, Adam.
And there are some great serving on right now out there who are doing it for the right reasons.
So we're almost finished. So we've got a couple of minutes left.
Do you want two pub quiz questions?
Go on.
That I've started writing for the weekend here. The Metropolitan Police Force is the largest in the UK. Do you know what the second largest police force in the UK is?
Police Scotland?
West Mercia.
I mean, it's one of the Yorkshire ones.
Alistair got it correct. There are 32,000 serving police officers in the Met. There's 16,500 in Police Scotland. Used to be Greater Manchester was the biggest, but since they merged all the forces in Scotland.
So that was a fiddle you told Ali before we started. Okay,
No,
what's it?
Yeah.
You think I want him to win? You're having a fucking laugh.
Is the second question, Bob? How many of those in the Met are wrong uns?
Oh yeah, it's 99%. The other one, which I would assume Adam will get, is who received the longest prison sentence from a Scottish court?
Think of the best crime book you've ever read, guys.
I was going to let you plug it.
Oh, I mean, they're all shit.
I believe he went fishing. Is that yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, in a van.
It was Angus Sinclair got 37 years, and I was actually genuinely surprised when Packer didn't get more. But it was the two of them are up there. There you go. I just started writing a very short true crime round for next week's pub quiz. So there's the two that I've done so far.
And is that at the Settle In, Bob? Is that where you run the quiz?
Yeah, once a month I do it. So Ali and I record in the Settle In. It's the oldest pub in Stirling. It was opened in 1733. Sorry. So we're having its 300th birthday in a couple of years' time, and we're actually we joke about the place, but we adore it. We're very honoured that they let us. They never organise anything on a Tuesday night so that Ali and I can sit up the back and have the old cunts down the bottom. Sorry, am I allowed to say that on here? They're all playing dominoes while Ali and I are recording a podcast. And we make no bones about it. It's a pub. We record in a pub. If you don't like background music, jog on. There's loads of podcasts. But it's a place that's close to my heart. Adam, you've been in. You know how cool a pub it is. And I host a pub quiz once a month. And I'm actually going to the pub quiz straight after this, but I'm not hosting this evening. I'm partaking.
Wonderful. So, guys, we're over an hour, and it's felt like minutes, hasn't it? It's been so much fun. I'm sure the audience agree with us. Yeah.
I mean, the amount of folk that dropped off and on this call is just mad.
Ali, any final comments at the end of this evening?
Thanks a million for having us. And although I talked to begin with about the sensationalist content and the worrying lack of research that I think is a trend, there is also some fantastic stuff being done. And I think that some of them do deserve a little mention. And the Channel 4 documentary on the killing of Fawiza Anwar by her husband on Arthur's Seat is amazing. The entire trial is recorded, and it is a fascinating watch.
I had the pleasure of interviewing. Family members of that on that case, and it's wild.
Yeah.
Bob, anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we leave this evening?
I'd like to leave you with a thank you, love you, bye, as always.
It's on brand.
Very good. Paul, anything from you?
Yeah, I'd just like to say Happy Mum's Day to all those mums out there. And if your mum's not with us, then we're all saving spare thoughts for you.
And if you're a single dad, I hope you got flowers.
Yeah.
Mike, anything to add?
This has been the only moment in the last 10 minutes that I've actually been able to hear. So
that is the end.
This is the end.
That's not a bad thing,
So
Mike.
I've enjoyed the ending. Thank you very much.
Is that your usual line?
Is that what you were saying in the last 10 minutes, Mike, when you were in on camera?
I'm done, and now I'm out.
Okay. So thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to join us this evening. This has been Bob, Ali, Paul, Mike, and me, Adam. It's been great fun. See you next time. Cheerio for now.
Hey guys, see you all.